Jy is ingeskakel op GROOTplaas en ons gas saam met ons vanoggend in die ateljee is Sinovuyo Moabalobelo en sy is van Agbiz, sy is hoof van strategiese projekte by Agbiz. Sino, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
So, firstly, foot and mouth disease, it's a major problem, but what is the biggest threat at the moment?
Biosecurity and the containment measures, but also what is starting to cause some friction on the ground and some concern is the rollout or lack of visibility around or clarity around the rollout on the vaccination program.
So what has been the uptake from government side regarding the vaccine rollout? I know we've been looking at getting additional vaccines into the country, but are we getting those vaccines fast enough?
It would appear that through the ICC, the Industry Coordination Council that Agbiz is participating on, that government and other stakeholders are rallying all efforts towards getting some clarity in terms of the pipeline of vaccines to come into the country, the current and existing number of vaccines that we have, as well as what's already being deployed.
So I know there's another court case with the Minister of Agriculture, Minister John Steenhuisen. They've now been speaking about, getting private people, farmers, to actually get their hands on the vaccines. Do you think that is the right direction to move?
Certainly, I think it would help alleviate some of the pressures that the public sector is facing in terms of rapid response. Agbiz has been doing some advocacy in that Industry Coordination Council to support efforts that the private sector can then start participating in regulatory matters related to vaccination rollout, deployment and other measures.
Do you think that is what we have to do at this moment with the current outbreak of foot and mouth disease, just to contain the situation before we actually get it under control?
Most certainly. I think we saw sort of elements of this come through COVID-19. In COVID, PPE was the best and most effective way for us to curb the spike and the increase in our COVID-19 in our COVID-19 cases. I think through foot and mouth disease, if we deploy certain mechanisms and we take those lessons and learnings and we bank them and we roll out in a way that enables the private sector to support these efforts, we could get ahead of the curve quite quickly.
So similar to COVID that you just mentioned, PPE and disinfectants are also extremely important when it comes to foot and mouth disease. But why are they so important?
Well, we're hearing that in order for it to not transfer, biosecurity measures are going to be critical in ensuring that we keep our numbers low and we keep the herd safe. The sort of containment of movement as well is going to be one of those. The PPE that has been requested has been, specifically on the public sector side, has been from ondersteun as an example, and from colleagues that would be within the labs and ensuring that they're doing some sufficient testing, etc. And so in order for us to stay ahead of transferability and for containment, we are seeing that there's a big call for PPE on the ground.
So in terms of the containment of foot and mouth disease, what have farmers been putting in place to make sure that there is no further spread of foot and mouth?
We see on the ground a lot of foot baths. We're seeing that people, from a biosecurity point of view, are trying to restrict and control the movement of their herd. We're seeing that through the joint operational committees or organizational councils, they are also establishing, the private sector supporting the establishment of spraying centers and movement control mechanisms. And so spraying vehicles, dipping feet in foot baths to make sure that we're leaving any contaminated equipment as well. Disposal of the PPE as well is very, very critical. And so containment of the FMD and any related materials is critical.
So from an Agbiz point of view, what is the role that you guys are playing in this response?
We've recently called out to private sector members and any donor parties that would be interested in supporting either through the donation of funds or donation of goods, PPE, etc., support with logistics, cold chain, etc., to reach out to us. We will then ensure that we're in the most responsible way possible, distributing PPE both on the public and private sector side to ensure that we could quickly and rapidly respond to the FMD crisis.
So those are the main support areas that you are focusing on, or is there additional support areas?
There are sort of broadly three categories. The one on the sort of goods and actual PPE or actual products. PPE is one of the most critical, so overalls, surgical masks, etc. We've been requested some syringes, some needles, etc. to help on the ground as well. And then the next category is capacity, so data capturing, traceability is another critical area that we need to support with, making sure that we know which animals have been vaccinated, which haven't, where they are, etc. in the country. And then lastly, sort of cold chain and other support areas, logistics, just deployment efforts to support general response.
Sino, we'll be back with you in a second. Dis ons gas op GROOTplaas vir vanoggend, Sinovuyo Moabalobelo, en sy is van Agbiz. Ons is terug op GROOTplaas net hierna. Is al geskakel op GROOTplaas en ons gaan saam met ons vanoggend van Agbiz af, die Hoof van Strategiese Projekte, Sinovuyo Moabalobelo, en ons gesels 'n bietjie oor bek-en-klouseer en hoe hulle Nywerheidskoördineringsraad dit ondersteun. So, Sino, in terms of policy changes that need to be considered now with this foot-and-mouth outbreak, what are those policy changes?
So if you recall, back in COVID-19, we had a very agile and responsive way of engaging with policy amendments. We really do see that it would be critical for the public sector colleagues to consider enabling the private sector to play a more active role in some of the more regulated areas, like vaccine procurement, like vaccine or vaccination rollout, etc. And so I think one of the big areas that we've been lobbying for is a change in what we call the Section 10 scheme, which would enable the department or officials within the department to confer powers on private sector or even private veterinarians to then start vaccinating on the ground.
So you've now mentioned the private vets. Which services are most needed and can support the efforts?
As of now, I think the support of the private veterinarians would be critical in enabling, especially on the ground, a rapid vaccination rollout. I think one of the other things is cold chain. It's critical that we ensure the integrity of the vaccines, not only from once they've arrived, but also from travel and logistics, and we need to ensure that they stay at certain temperatures, just dependent on the various vaccines rather. And so cold chain is another critical service. Logistics is another one. Getting these vaccines around the country to where they're needed the most is another one. And then lastly, but probably the most critical and burning issue at this current stage is the disposal of waste and disposal of deceased animals or carcasses rather, is going to be another one that we're needing to solve for.
So you've mentioned now the cold chain logistics in terms of this response, but is that something that needs to come from the private sector? We don't have the capability from government side to make sure that this rollout is effective?
Not to say that we don't have the capacity. I think it would just, in order to enable speedy response, if private sector entities are able to support, we could currently manage what is currently in hand in terms of vaccinations and get them to the various points that are critical.
So you've drawn the comparison a few times between this foot-and-mouth outbreak in our national herd and COVID-19. Do you think, in terms of our response, we've been more reactive and not proactive enough?
I think we certainly could improve on areas. I think we learned very valuable lessons during COVID-19, and it would be a pity for us as a country to forget the muscle that we built in terms of rapid response, in terms of collaboration and partnership. And so, and not to be critical, I just do think that we would need to think about a sort of more sustainable and collaborative way of moving ahead.
So similar to COVID as well, data capturing and traceability was one of the biggest issues. Is this a similar situation with the foot-and-mouth?
Most certainly. We're seeing that we're needing to understand on a day-by-day basis where there are increases in new cases, and therefore the traceability and our ability to know what's happening on the ground is becoming more and more critical and apparent.
So how are donations and support at the moment being coordinated?
We've established, through my office in Agbiz, we've established a mechanism for organizations to reach out on my email address. We are logging and keeping a national needs register. So we're also coordinating with private entities, private sector entities and the public sector in terms of what is most critically needed on the ground. We then would compare against what donations have been pledged going forward, and we are then making sure we're able to deploy those needs as we're able to procure them.
So I think it's a good idea if you maybe give us that information if somebody does want to reach out and support.
Most certainly, thank you. We'll do that.
What are the biggest challenges specifically when it comes to the rural areas?
We're seeing that communication is going to be critical. We would like to start prioritizing a mechanism to translate some of the information into mother tongues, so into languages that would be understood in those areas. It's also unclear from a traceability point of view what's happening in those areas. It's unclear whether they have, and we make the assumption that they do not have what they're going to need to be able to curb the increase in these cases. And it's also at this stage, especially from a national office point of view, it's also unclear whether or not they are aware that, of actually just the impact of this crisis.
So, do you think that some community awareness is going to play a big role in stopping the spread of foot-and-mouth disease?
Most certainly. And it's going to be difficult in those communal areas because in the term communal actually is implying that herds gather and sort of are moved in big groupings. And so it's going to be difficult to ensure that we're mitigating the spread. But I think also communicating that in a way that's going to be understood from an impact point of view on the ground is going to be critical.
Absolutely. Sino, thank you so much for your time this morning. Dis ons gas op GROOTplaas vanoggend, Sinovuyo Moabalobelo, en sy is die Hoof van Strategiese Projekte by Agbiz. Dis al wat vir ons tyd het vir GROOTplaas vir vandag. Ons hoop jy het dit saam met ons geniet en skakel weer môre in, dan kuier ons saam.